Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you may be watching this. I'm Jamie Moeller, and this is the Grad Connection, where my goal here is to help graduate students not just survive, but to thrive in graduate school. If you've been watching this series, if you have found it useful, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel where these videos live. If you have further interest in kind of connecting with other graduate students, and I put some extra content and some other thoughts and stuff on a Facebook group called the Grad Connection. So I'd encourage you to take a look there. If you want, you can connect to me on Facebook or LinkedIn as well, because oftentimes when I release these videos, I put it there. So there are multiple channels here. Eventually, I probably will do lives, or at least that's my intent, assuming that I can get permission from LinkedIn. I'm kind of waiting to be able to do that because I'd like to be able to do a live to Facebook, to YouTube, and to LinkedIn all at the same time through Restream. So that's kind of my goal, but at least for now, I'm going to continue to pre-record these with different content segments. Because I think the limited information or feedback that I've gotten from you all is that you do like these videos, you find them helpful. So I hope that they're helping you kind of work through what I would call the discipline. And I've been trying to tag on some extra content, like last time I talked about the time matrix or the Eisenhower matrix. And eventually, as I move out of talking about the discipline and starting to talk about other topics, I have basically a long list here of things that I would like to focus on content-wise. And so for graduate students, I'll just give you a preview here. Planning to graduate on time, developing a mentoring team, time management, authoring, peer review, executive presence, focusing a research question, creating a literature review, LinkedIn, ResearchGate, taxes. And I have like multiple pages of stuff, of notes that I've jotted down of topics and things that I'm planning on bringing to you. And, basically what I'm going to try to do is continue to do this week by week and just kind of work my way through this content. If there are certain topics that you find interesting or you'd like to hear me have a conversation on, I'm not saying that I know everything about everything. I'm just basically sharing things that I've learned, and I really want to try to just get it out there so that I can refer people to it. And so if you don't have the opportunity to come to Purdue, hear me live, you can get on here. Now, I'm also getting some notes from prior graduates and other people that I know. So if you're finding this content useful, great. It's not, my intent was to deliver it primarily to graduate students at Purdue, but if there are other people that are finding it useful, that's great too. I'm happy for you. It's always great to reconnect with folks and to hear from folks that I haven't heard from. They're out there being successful and doing those kinds of things. So what I want to do today in this video is kind of like the last of our of the kind of the discipline, well, at least the overview of the discipline, I'll say. And what I want to talk about today is kind of like annually or quarterly, what are the things that you do? And so essentially the quarterly, we've talked about, let me just do a quick review. So we talked about the daily game, where every day you're focusing on small endeavors, 15 minutes at a minimum, 15 minutes in each of the 4 areas, that is physical, spiritual, relational, and professional, so that you're being active in those areas every day. And that very first one of the early videos, I talked about kind of what that looks like. I'm thinking that I may end up doing deeper dives in each of those areas just to talk more about things. And so if you would find that of interest, let me know. But that's the daily game, right? So that daily you're working on all 4 areas. Now, being honest, in the weekend, a lot of times Saturday and Sunday, I don't exercise. I usually typically take Saturday as a day of rest, because Sunday's not a day of rest for me because of activities in the church and those things that I'm involved with, music-wise and otherwise. So it's not really, getting up at 4:30 in the morning on a Sunday, which is what I typically do, is not a day of rest for me. But the daily game is, you have to figure out how this is going to work for you, right? What is sustainable and what works for you? And so I would encourage you not to get too rigid with it. I mean, you want to be pursuing and expanding in those 4 areas every day. But to become too rigid with it, it's not sustainable. It just won't stick. I also say it's hard to do alone. And so I would encourage you to connect with other people, spur them. Maybe, if it's physical exercise is an area you have difficulty with, find a partner, buddy up, and maybe you can challenge each other. Maybe it's in some other area, but essentially that's the daily game. And then we talked about the weekly game, where we're looking weekly at, big things that we want to get done that particular week. And that's kind of where the time matrix came in. Now, let's talk about the annual. So basically, and I say annual, it's really quarterly. It's kind of like I take the time to do kind of a reflection quarterly. And oftentimes what I try to do now, it's very difficult in this COVID environment where life's not really typical, right? It's not normal right now. But what I try to do, even if it's a staycation, is to, at the end of a quarter, really take the time to reflect on, what's working on the daily game, what's not working on the daily game, what's working on the weekly game, where do I want to go in the next 3 months, next 6 months, next 9 months. So physically, that looks like, what routines am I doing, what's working for me exercise wise. Spiritually, it's like, do I feel like I'm growing spiritually? Do I feel like I'm expanding and growing? In my relationship, oftentimes it's a conversation that Lisa and I have. We talk about, maybe trips or things that we want to do together, in the coming year, coming 6 months, coming 3 months. And usually I'm planning like, at least with like my wife, is usually I'm planning these bigger things that we might do. Now, again, COVID has changed that kind of. And now I'm glad to see that it seems that we may be moving out and be maybe a little more freedom and stuff. So we're getting back to whatever the new normal might be. But usually that's where Lisa and I talk about, what things have gone well over the last 6 months. And usually it's at the end of each quarter. And so in a normal year, usually she and I will go on a trip around March. And, varies where we go. You don't even have to go anywhere. It could just be a matter of reflection, right? But this is what she and I does or do. Whichever the way to go. Anyway, that's what we do, is that we talk about, okay, what do we want to do in that next quarter? And I always try to plan something towards the end of that quarter. And just the way it works out in our life, basically at the end of March, usually it's a small trip. We usually take a small trip over our anniversary, which is in early June. But then end of June, wait a minute, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So January, February, March, April. So around March, April, right? June, July, August, September. All right. So I'm counting in fours. Anyway, I'm all screwed up. But long story short, at the end of each quarter, I try to plan something where I get away, and it's actually, I typically just kind of do a total interrupt of, what I've been doing. And so oftentimes I may take that entire week and not exercise. Now it's hard to do that. And it's actually hard if you do that and you don't do any exercise that entire week while you're away. It can be difficult to get back on track when you get back. So restarting and re-upping. So it's a lot of times easier just to keep going and not back off on that. But I like this idea of what I call, and I learned this obviously from that system that I had talked about, but this idea of a pattern interrupt, something that interrupts your normal activity within that quarter. And I really do like being able to take the last week of the quarter and doing something where it's just reflective and it's forward thinking as well as what are the big things that I might want to get. And so, if I were talking about, like I said, as it relates to relationally with my wife, we're talking about trips and those kinds of things. Or professionally, this is where I might think about, okay, what publications do I want to get out in the next 3-6 months? It's forward looking at a much deeper level. So it's like the daily game, you're kind of looking right here. The weekly game, you're kind of looking out to the ground 15, 20 feet, 50 feet in front of you. We talk about the quarterly game, we're looking more at the horizon so that I'm using this analogy, but hopefully that makes sense. As you start doing this, honestly, it gets easier because a lot of times people are like, well, how can you project what you're going to be doing, a quarter out, 3 months out, 4 months out or whatever. It eventually comes to you, right? And so, to me, all of these pieces play together, right? And so I had some questions here. So quarterly, it's kind of like when I'm in this reflective week at the end of the quarter, I'm saying, okay, where have I been? Where have I been in all 4 areas? What's working? What have I accomplished? Because obviously, if I'm ticking off a major endeavor weekly, and using something that's important but not urgent, and getting that done, I should be making progress in each of the 4 areas too. So what have I accomplished? Where do I want to go? And I'll be honest, and what do you want? I mean, I think a lot of times we're afraid to actually express what we want. And sometimes we may not even think about what it is that we want, but you can very easily tell what you're pursuing. If you kind of feel like I'm not really sure what I'm pursuing, two things that I can encourage you to do. Number one, keep track of what you're doing, where you spend your time every day. For a week, do that. Just track where you spend your time, and it may seem meticulous, but you'll very quickly find out what you're striving for and what you're trying to hit if you do that. It's very easy to tell what's important to you if you track your time. You can also tell what's important to you if you will actually take a week and track your money. See where you spend money, where you put your time and where you put your money. Those are the things that are important to you, whether you purposely did that or not. And so ask yourself if you want something, right, and you currently don't have it, and you track your time and your money, and where you're spending your time and your money are not taking you where you want, change what you're doing. Einstein said the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing and think you're going to get a different result. If you're unwilling to change your daily game, if you're unwilling to change your weekly game, your quarterly game's not going to change, and annually you're not going to make you're going to keep in the same direction you're going. And as hard as it is to change, once we get set into a pattern, it's really hard to change. But we need these what I'm calling pattern interrupts to kind of shake us up, to change things, because we get too set in what we're doing. So I would ask you, where do you want to go, and what do you want to do, and how is what you're doing today and this week and this quarter building towards that? If it's not building towards that, then change what you're doing. You're not going to get different results just doing the same thing day after day, week after week, month after month, and think automatically, like a ripe cherry off a tree, it's going to fall on you, or some Disney magic's going to come along and change your world. It's not going to happen. Only in fairy tales. And you have to be real with yourself too. I would encourage you cut through the bull crap. We are all master liars to ourselves. We justify allowing ourselves to do this or to do that, good or bad. But we're master liars. Tell the truth. Just be honest. First it starts being honest with yourself. You can't be honest with others if you're not honest with yourself. That's absolutely true. So it starts with you being honest about where you are. If you are overweight, it's because you have not exercised and you've eaten crap. If your spiritual life is in the dump, if it's non-existent, it's because you just haven't focused on it. If you don't know where to go, I would encourage you. I actually had a comment from one of the students that's involved with this, where he was talking about, I'm trying to figure out the spiritual thing. And it's like, my encouragement is listen to your head and your heart as to where it directs you to go. And I said this, and it may offend some people, but we put so much credence, we put so much trust, we put so much value in the words of people that died 2,000 years ago. And I don't care what religion you're talking about, that's true. We have these sacred texts, and that's good. I'm not saying that that's bad. It's good that we find value in those things and truths in those things. But when we put so much stock in those things, and yet we discount the living voice on the inside of us, and we discredit it, and don't hold any value to what maybe our own head and heart is telling us and in how to move spiritually, well, I'm sorry to say it's, you're probably not going to make progress in that area. You got to listen to your head and your heart. And so I'd encourage you to pursue that, if your spiritual area is dead or non-existent, or you're not getting the results you want in your spiritual area. In your relationships, same thing. You keep doing the same thing in your relationships, you'll get the same results time and time again. And relationships need spontaneity. They need certain things that are the same, but they also need things that are different. And so if you get set in a pattern where it's just the same old thing, crazy thing, one of the things that I do with my wife is, and this is what I have to do, is about every quarter, at some point, I usually have a repeating calendar reminder in my calendar to say, have you bought flowers for your wife recently? It's to spur me. It's kind of like that. I mentioned this application called Love Nudge. That's what that's about. Be innovative in your relationship. Keep it fresh. Keep it sparked. If you don't invest in your relationship, I guarantee, just like anything else, it's going to die. And so you can find out what relationships are important to you, but just by looking at your time tracker, as to if you kept track of your time in a week or so, you'd be able to tell which relationships are most important to you. And if you don't find that your significant other has a prominent place in the time and the money in your life, then they probably don't matter to you, which means you're probably going to lose them. And you can think you're the strongest person in the world, but if you're not investing in the relationship first and foremost with your significant other, second, if you're with your children, if you have them, third, with your parents and other siblings, fourth, and it just goes out. If you don't invest in those things, they will die. And I realize you can't invest in every relationship, but you should have a few that you hold dear and that you can see that you've invested time and money in. Period. If you don't do that, then I can tell that the relationships are not going to grow. They're just going to simply die. And then lastly, professionally, if you're not getting to where you want to be professionally, and we all go through dry seasons in any of these areas, but professionally as well. Sometimes opportunities are less plentiful. I think this is just my own opinion, but I think when you're younger and you're applying yourself and you're pursuing, you're trying to grow, you're trying to expand, you're trying not to suck. I think the opportunities are more plentiful or in the early days, and as you mature in your career, the opportunities become fewer and fewer. Particularly the more you stay in one place. I've only ever been at one institution at Purdue. I've been there my entire life, including all the way back to my undergraduate days. So I started at Purdue as an undergraduate student in 1989, and I never left. I've been in various roles, graduate student, lecturer. I've served all these roles, and I'll say that's true. That's been my experience at Purdue. Now, if I would have shifted to other universities and stuff, I might have found that the opportunities didn't start to wane, or maybe there would have been greater opportunities. I don't know. But one of the things I realized, if I would have done that professionally, I would have sacrificed being around my family. My wife would not have been as happy. And if you were to ask her, she knows that I joke all the time. If I get a job announcement from this place or that place, or we go somewhere and I'll say, hey, would you like to live here? And she's like, she always entertains me, but she's like, no, I like it right where we're at. So, but if you want to grow in any of the 4 areas of life, if you keep doing the same thing that you've always done, you just keep repeating that, you're going to get the same results over and over again. So you need pattern interrupts. You need to change what you're doing, change it up, shift if you have to. Another thing is I would encourage you to not negotiate with yourself. And what I mean by this is with exercise particularly, it's easy to say, it's easy when, 4:30 rolls around and you need to get up and exercise. And hey, I'm preaching to myself by when I'm talking about this, but it's easy to kind of roll over, hit the clock and look at the time and say, I'll just do it tomorrow. And then what happens if you get into the habit, and I actually heard this phrase from, I think it was Tony Robbins, and whether you like him or don't like him, there are truths into what he delivers, and it obviously has value because he's highly successful, makes a lot of money, and is very popular. I think there's probably a lot of truth to it, whether that's your cup of tea or not. But there's a truth that he said is he's like, I don't negotiate with myself. So, when the clock rolls around 4:30 and I need to get up and do my routine, his routine is crazy. I don't know that I could do his routine, but I'm paraphrasing what he said, but I don't negotiate with myself. I don't allow myself to talk myself. I get myself up. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. You have to take control of your life, and no excuses, no bull, no crap, no excuses. It's you. You don't have anybody to blame. We all go through tough times, and I know I may get some flack for saying this, but ultimately at some point you have to take control of your life and say, I'm responsible for me. And if I'm not getting results in an area, I take responsibility for that. Other people might have a part to play in that, but ultimately it's up to me. A really good, and I don't have a really good poem is the one that talks about, and I'm drawing a blank on the name. But it's basically, I'm the master of my destiny, I'm the captain of my soul is the way it ends. And some of you will probably be able to quote it off the top of your head. I'm drawing a blank on it right now. It'll probably come to me in 5 minutes when I'm not even talking about this. But anyway, you are the master of your destiny. You're the captain of your soul, and you choose. First, you have to acknowledge the results you have are the results you've created. And then once you can acknowledge that, then you can acknowledge the fact that you can actually change your destiny by changing what you do daily, what you do weekly, what you do monthly. So don't negotiate with yourself. Tomorrow when it rolls around, time to get up and do whatever it is that you need to do, don't hit the snooze button 5 times. Get your butt out of bed, force yourself, and just your body's going to want to sleep in. Your mind might want to either, or might want to also. But you decide, you choose, and take responsibility for that. Right? And just get yourself up and force it. And I'm telling you, that's what I have to do. There are a lot of days where I don't feel like getting up early and exercising. And if I allow myself to, if I allow the room to negotiate with myself, I will talk myself out of it. Just like I said earlier, we oftentimes talk ourselves into or create defenses in our own, we're liars to ourselves, and we make justifications for the behaviors that we allow, that we normally wouldn't allow. We justify them in ourselves and we would condemn them in other people. So don't discount the idea that, simple daily actions, while simple, not easy, but simple, will compound and make a big impact in your life. An analogy that Garrett White uses, and again, a lot of this is actually the impact that the program that he started called Wake Up Warrior had on my life. And I'm kind of trying to apply this to graduate students and trying to relay it for a variety of reasons. You can go back to the very first video and find out more information about that and kind of what I'm trying to do here. But one of the sayings he says is, you will score more, a baseball team will score more runs by just looking to try to create singles than it will by trying to create home runs. You will be more successful by simple daily actions, just doing that rather than trying to hit big home runs. It's the consistent daily work that will actually propel you forward. If you're trying to look for a home run, you're going to be few and far between. You'll actually score a whole lot more points, just simple daily swinging singles. Get on base. That's all you have to do. And if you study this out, if you know anything about baseball, and I'm not a big sports aficionado, but I believe it to be true, and the research, there is data to show just getting on base, right? Getting on base is what scores runs. And if you consistently hit singles, you will eventually score and score and score and score much, much more rapidly than trying to hit home runs. So just consistent daily living will make a huge impact in your life. So I get a little preachy here, I understand, but it is what it is. You can eat it, you can take it as it is, and eat the wheat, spit out the chaff. If I'm not your cup of tea, you can go on to whatever's next, right? But I'm just kind of telling you, I'm just kind of speaking from my heart of trying to tie all this together from, the daily actions, the daily discipline, to the weekly discipline, to the annual discipline. And I basically have experienced this, right? I've seen the growth in my life and the expansion in my life, and hopefully I suck less, in areas that in the past 3 or 4 years ago, particularly, I mean, it's particularly noticeable. I notice it in my body the most, in my physical area the most. I'm not sure where you'll notice it the most, but nevertheless, I would encourage you to really live this out. It's your choice. I can't force you to do it, and even if you have a buddy or someone close to you that you're doing this with, they can't force you, right? You have to choose, and you have the ability, even with no matter what setbacks you might have in your life. Even if you don't have a lot of money, and I've tried to tie this into, you don't have to have a lot of money to exercise. Just get your butt out of bed and go outside and walk. You don't have to have a treadmill. You don't have to have a bunch of exercise equipment. You don't have to have a membership to a gym. You can go outside and you can walk and you can run. If you can't walk and run, then figure out some other way to move and make yourself sweat, right? There are ways to do these things that don't cost money. And then if you have money to throw into it, it's just, kind of icing on the cake, as it were. So with that, I'm going to close down this session of the Graduate Connection. Again, I would encourage you to give me some feedback. Let me know what you're thinking. Just drop me a line, whether that be on the YouTube channel as a comment or in Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever mechanism you want to do that, you can get a hold of me. I encourage you to engage. Engage with one another and engage with me. Engage with the content. And most importantly, none of this matters if you don't put any of it to practice in your life. You can mentally ascend to it and give me a digital amen, hallelujah, brother. You're teaching it, brother. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm wanting from you. I'm wanting you to apply this to your life and have it make a difference in your life. So I hope you'll do that. I hope you find this useful. Like I said, probably the next couple, I think I'm going to just interject some other content pieces that are not related to the discipline and stuff, more general graduate kind of stuff over the next couple weeks. And then I'll probably return maybe, if you have an interest in me diving deep in the physical, the spiritual, the relational, the whatever, I'm willing to do that. But I'm going to kind of move on to some other professional content, just kind of shift topics so that you don't get wore out by me talking about this over and over and over again and me droning on and being preachy about it. So nevertheless, with that, I hope you find this useful. And with that, I'll say goodbye from the Grad Connection, where I hope you do more than just survive. I hope you thrive. Take care.